All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. Today's presentation is forecasting using predictive modeling in Planning Analytics Workspace. Okay. So before we begin, just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. Questions that we get asked often during these webinars are, will we be able to get a copy of the slides? Will the event be recorded? And the answer to both of those is yes. In addition, one of the other things that I encourage everybody to do is to please visit Revelwood's YouTube channel to view our previous webinars. All of our webinars that we have been doing over the past few years are uploaded on the site, and it gives you the opportunity to look at everything associated with planning analytics, with development concepts, with financial planning, and a series of other tasks. So just to give a brief introduction, today's presenters will be myself. My name is Lee Lazaro, and I'm the Planning Analytics Practice Leader. And I'm also joined by Nina Inverso, one of our senior consultants. Between Nina and myself, we have well over 20 years of planning analytics and TM1 experience in everything associated with designing, developing, and supporting TM1 and planning analytics components. Today's presentation is focused mostly on the forecasting side and on a specific model, but Nina and I are both very comfortable with all components associated with planning analytics. The agenda that we're going to follow for today is we're going to talk a little bit about who we are. Why are you here today? Why are you listening to Nina and I talk a little bit about Revelwood as a company? We'll also talk a little bit about what is PAW? What is that phrase that you may have heard a little bit recently called New Experience? IBM has been using that terminology a lot. They call it the PAW New Experience. We're going to do a demo today of the predictive modeling aspect. Nina is going to walk us through a live example of a system of how we set it up, how you use it, how you look at the results. And then after we look at the technical aspect of it, we're going to shift it over to more of a financial piece. We want to talk about also other things to consider. The approach associated with the tool is going to show us the technical features, but we also want to think about the business side. We want to think about the use case. And then we'll talk about some other next steps. Based on that, the reason that I said that we want to make sure that as we're talking today, where we want to talk about both the technical side and the business side, is the business side is important. Revelwood believes that we speak business first. Revelwood believes that there's more to a computer system than a computer. And that's where Revelwood comes into play. Revelwood is an award-winning IBM Analytics business partner. We have been doing this for a long, long time, and we have won a series of awards. Over to the right, you could see the credentials that we have, where we are a gold business partner. And Revelwood was actually the first company in the entire world to achieve what IBM calls gold status. We have been doing this for over 25 years, and we have hundreds of successful implementations worldwide. We have a variety of implementations in US currency, other currencies. We have implementations where we have thousands of users across the globe, and we have implementations where we have one user sitting at a desk using the entire system. So we've run through the full gamut of all kinds of implementations, all sizes, all types. And the reason that we've done that is because of our team. We consist of a team of experienced consultants that are both business and technology consultants. My background is an undergraduate in both accounting and computer science, a master's degree in both MBA in accounting and in MIS. The approach that Revelwood uses in regards to implementing is to not think of planning analytics as a tool, but think of it as a business process. And it gives us the opportunity to come up with implementations and good approaches as opposed to just good systems. And because of that, IBM has also recognized us, where we are a member of IBM's North American Business Partner Council. We're part of the global IBM Planning Analytics Advisory Board. And what that means is that IBM often comes to us and asks us, what should we do? We help define their roadmaps. We help give feedback that clients have asked for, and we've also given feedback that we've come up with in regards to our planning. So, like I said, we've been doing this for a long time, and hopefully, based on that, you'll have understand a little bit in terms of why we say we speak business first. Okay. So now let's jump right into it. What is PAW? Most of the people on this call probably understand what PAW is. PAW stands for Planning Analytics Workspace. And really what it is it's the web-based interface for IBM Planning Analytics. Okay? So for those of you who've been using Planning Analytics for a long time, you also know that it used to be called TM1. And you know that there was an Excel version and a web version. Planning Analytics was partially a rebranding of the name, but it's partially also a change in the approach. Because the goal of planning analytics is to almost flip it a full 180 to give us a different use of the interfaces. In the legacy world, for those of you who have been using this for a long time, in the TM1 world, the goal of a web interface was for your end users. It was a tool called TM1 Web. It was designed for reporting and input only. And all of your maintenance, your development, your system administration, and your reporting and your input, all of that was done in the Excel world using a tool called Perspectives. In the new world, PAW has flipped it, and they have made Excel the tool for reporting and input. This new tool, depending on the name that you use, it's called Planning Analytics for Excel. Some users call it PAX, some users call it PAFE. There are different interfaces and different legalities in regards to what wording and what verbiage you use, but the overall goal, I'm just going to call it Excel. In the new Excel world, the goal is to be reporting and input, and all of the other stuff, the reporting and the input and the development and the administration, all of the maintenance is now done on the web. All of that maintenance is done through this tool called PAW. Okay? The great thing about PAW and the great thing about PAX over the course of planning analytics is IBM has gotten into a habit, and a wonderful habit, of releasing updates every month. Again, for those of you who have been using this for a while, you know that in the legacy world, TM1 was updated periodically. There's usually one major release per year and maybe a couple of smaller releases over the course of the year. But now IBM has gotten in the habit of releasing both a new web interface and a new Excel interface, or I should say version, every month. And as you look at the screen, you could see that over the last 15 months, there's been 14 different PAW updates. Over the last 13 months, there's been 12 different PAX updates. The great thing about this release is that it comes out every month, and it gives us the ability for quick bug fixes and quick features and pieces like that. But one of the major things that came out is in Q4 2020, depending on your version, whether you were local or whether you were cloud, one of those versions, 57 or 58, introduced a series of new functionality aspects. And this is what IBM has been calling the PAW New Experience. Okay? And this PAW New Experience has a lot of new functionality. Okay? The overall interface has changed. So IBM has made it much more consistent with all of the other IBM products. They've come up with a better use of real estate. They have created a consistent layout. They have given us the ability to add some new features like adding your own images and creating your own widgets, and overall improving the look and feel. The main thing associated with look and feel comes into the reporting. IBM has started merging together. They've talked about this for a while, and this is really the first iteration of merging together Cognos Analytics. And as part of this new experience, PAW now shares many of the widgets with Cognos Analytics. It gives us the ability to do much more customization, fonts, color palettes, labels, positioning, things like that. It gives us the ability to create a series of new visualizations, bullet reports, multi-line columns, waterfall reports. It gives us an approach to do a much more intuitive development where I can do a lot of dragging and dropping as opposed to learning to become a true developer in order to create some of the PAW reporting. Another thing associated with the new experience is the administration. IBM has reorganized their administration to not only make it easier to see and navigate and use, but to give us some new functionality. They've created a summary page. They've done a great job of grouping pieces together where you used to go to 2 or 3 different spots and now can find it all in one. They've given us a very easy way to migrate the various PAW books using something called lifecycle management. And they've also created versioning on the administration. So in the old world, there were certain things where you would try to do some kind of administration and say, well, this is applicable to on-premise, and if you're on the cloud, don't worry about it, or vice versa. Now, as part of the new administration tool, IBM has made it applicable to your version. So if you're local, you'll see some of these features that you see on the screen. If you're cloud, you might see different features. Another piece of the new experience, the main reason we're all here today, is an approach called forecasting. Forecasting is really a predictive modeling approach where we're able to use time dependence to forecast and to do planning associated with predictive forecasting. It uses various smoothing algorithms, and it applies various algorithms and uses some of the aspects that many of you have heard phrases in the past of Watson and predictive and things like that. Nina's going to talk much more about this, so I'm going to kind of skip over the slide and not talk too much more about it. Another piece of the new experience, applications and plans. Applications and plans are really more of what many people reference as workflow. So it gives us the ability to group assets together. It gives us the ability to create step-by-step walkthroughs. It gives us the ability to do submissions where I can reject them and reset them and various aspects associated with workflow. And most importantly, it gives us the ability to decide when do we want to use this. With one of the new features, this is one of my favorite features here, of preview. We have the ability to preview a new feature before enabling. There are a lot of changes as part of the new experience. A lot of these changes, all of these changes are great, but a lot of these changes are really different than what users are used to seeing. So by having this preview option gives you the ability to flip it on, take a look at it, and see if you like it, and determine, do I want my end users to see it, or do I want to go back into the old way and transition them into it? So as you can see, there's a lot of aspects associated with the PAW New Experience. And over the course of the next 6 months, Revelwood will be conducting webinars on each of these aspects. For purposes of today, we're going to do a deep dive where we're going to jump right into the predictive modeling. So I'm going to turn it over to Nina, who is going to walk through the aspect of predictive modeling, show you a live example of it, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to stop my share. And Nina, it's all yours.
Thanks, Lee. So today I'm going to walk you through just configuring, previewing, and running a planning analytics forecast. We're going to go step by step through a standard example just to make sure you can get a look at really all the fundamentals of this feature. So what I have here is a PAW book where I've already set up a couple of tabs that are going to allow us to walk through all of these steps. And the first step when you're going to use the planning analytics forecasting feature is that you need to make sure that you have a time dimension that's configured correctly. So because we're dealing with time-based forecasting, we need to make sure that the cube we want to work with is using this time dimension. So I can confirm that. We're going to use the budget plan cube. This is from IBM's planning sample server. And I can confirm here that that's going to use the plan time dimension. So now we need to make sure that this dimension's type has been set to time. And what this is going to do is that it's going to tell Planning Analytics that plan time truly is a time dimension. And to do this, all we have to do is update the dimension type attribute so that the server is aware. And as you can see, I've got that already set up for us in the dimension attributes view that I have here. You'll see for plan time, dimension type, I have the word time. The next thing we're going to need to do to set up the time dimension hierarchy, to set up the time dimension so that it's ready to use, is to create a special hierarchy. What we need here is a flat base level hierarchy of the time dimensions with everything in chronological order. So in case this term is new to you, a flat hierarchy really just means one that doesn't contain any parent-child consolidation. So as you can see here, we just have our base level elements. We've got January 2003 through December 2005. And I've called this hierarchy forecasting just to make it easy for this example. So at this point, once we have our time dimension all set up, we can go ahead and create a view of the cube that we want to forecast. So I have this view created here of the budget plan cube. Now, the most important part of this view is going to be where we place the time dimension. So again, since we're dealing with time-based forecasting, I've selected my forecasting hierarchy here on the columns. And as of version 2.0.60, you're no longer required to display the entire hierarchy here. We have the option to just display a portion of it and actually select the scope of the historical data that's going to be used in the forecast. And I can point that out in one of the future steps when we set up the actual forecast. So you can forecast multiple elements for any of the dimensions that are placed on the rows. As you can see, I've selected my chart of accounts dimension, and I'm showing net operating income and the net operating income consolidation and some of its children. The rest of the dimensions are actually in the context, and for each of these, I've selected a single element. So the next step, once we have our view all set up, is really just to configure the forecast settings. So once you have your view active, all we have to do is click the little forecast button up above, and that's going to open the forecast menu on the right-hand side. So first we're going to go through the setup, and then we'll talk about some advanced settings. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the forecast period start and end months. This list here is going to automatically populate based on the selection that I have on my view. So we want our forecast period. We want to take our historical data through 2004, from January 2003 through December of 2004, and we want to start forecasting in January 2005, as I have selected. Then for the forecast period end, we want to go all the way through December 2005. And I can scroll over here just to show you that those months are in fact empty right now. We also have an option to save the statistical details as comments on the cells. This is enabled by default, so we can just leave that for now. If you want to disable it, all you have to do is uncheck the box. Okay, so let's take a look at the advanced settings. So we have the option to disable seasonality in the model. Because I do want to take it into account, I'm going to leave it on for now, but just want to point out that that's there. As I mentioned earlier, we also have the option to use historical data that's shown in the exploration or view that we're using, or to use all historical data that exists in the queue, in the TM1 queue. So since I have all the months that I want out on my view, I'm just going to leave it on the second option. So there's also an option to tell the model to ignore one or more time periods. This is really great, in the event that you have, say, a couple of outlier months that you just don't want taken into account in the model. We can add them to this little drop down here. The next option is used to select the confidence interval. So we're going to leave it at the 95% interval, but we can, in fact, make the model more or less choose a higher or lower confidence interval from any of these options here. And then finally, we have options for where we want to save the predictions. So we're actually not limited to just the elements that we see here when we save this forecasting prediction. As you can see, I can identify my version, dimension, and hierarchy, and then save the prediction to either the same version, which is what I have selected here, or there's an option to choose another one. You can also save the upper and lower bounds. So I've actually, when we run the forecast, we're going to have a version that's saved off into the optimistic budget and a version that's saved off into the pessimistic budget. Okay. So before we run the forecast on this view here, we have the option to preview it. So to preview the view, I'm just going to highlight one of the rows and click the preview button. And so there are two tabs here with information about the forecast that's going to take place. So the preview chart is going to display the forecasted data along with a surrounding shaded area, which is also called a cloud. There's a 95% chance that the actual values will fall in the shaded area, and that's because we selected a 95% confidence interval earlier. Up at the top, we can see that there's a high prediction accuracy. So we can be pretty confident that the values are going to fall somewhere in this range. The second tab just shows us some statistical details that provide information used by the model to perform the forecast. And finally, all we have to do is run the forecast. So to do this, I'm just going to highlight all of my rows and click the forecast button. So this is going to go ahead and run the forecast with all of the options we've just selected. And as soon as it's done, we'll see our values populated in the table here. There we go. And at the first month, we're going to have a comment for each of the rows. It just gives more details or more information about, what the model found and what took place. So to summarize, really, the Planning Analytics forecast feature can be a great way to quickly and efficiently, prepare a basic forecast for your system. At this point, we would then go in and make changes manually. This is really, as opposed to just doing the whole thing from scratch, can really give you some accurate and a boost to your forecasting steps. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Lee.
Excellent, thanks, Nina. And while Nina was giving the presentation, a question came through, and the question, two parts to the question. Will the results of the predictive forecast be accessible or viewable from perspectives? And the answer to that is, it is currently no. Well, currently it's designed to be run through PAW. Accessible and viewable, we would do a little bit of research. We'll get back to you on that. But the second part of your question is, can the predictive forecast be scheduled? And the answer to that is not right now, but it's currently on IBM's roadmap. IBM recently talked about their roadmap for what they're going to do for the first half of 2021, and the concept of scheduling a predictive forecast is absolutely on that. So that is something that's coming right now. Okay. So let me share the deck again, and thank you again, Nina, for the demonstration. Okay. So now that Nina has shown us how to use the tool, one of the things we also want to think about is we also want to think about the impacts of when we want to use it. And we want to think about the things to consider. Okay. So the first thing that you want to realize when you look at this is that this concept changes your budgeting approach. Prior to predictive forecasting, you most likely started with either a zero-based budget or you pre-populated your numbers based on something simple. For example, maybe you copied data from an existing strategic plan. Well, we're now adding another option to pre-populate the budget by having Planning Analytics fill in the numbers for you. This adds value by giving you a new starting point, but it also adds a danger by completely moving away from zero-based planning. What that means is that it's important to ensure that your planning team puts the effort into the plan. So one of the recommendations that Revelwood has is to create two planning scenarios. Create one for your predictive forecasting and create one for your existing planning approach. You can calculate your predictive budget at a high level, maybe something at a corporate level. And then you can do your existing budget at a more granular approach, maybe at a department level or a cost center level. Okay? After your budget is completed, you then have the ability to look at the two pieces in conjunction with each other. You can create a variance report to look deeper into the items with large variances and determine which values you want to use, but it also gives you the ability to go back and, I guess we could say, check up on the people doing the plan. By having those two different plans not only gets you more comfortable with the concept of doing predictive forecasting, but it also gives us the ability to determine, now that I'm doing zero-based as opposed to pre-populate, who's actually putting the effort into doing their budgeting. We also want to think about our history. So the ultimate goal is to create better predictions for the future. More history equates to less impact of anomalies, and it provides better seasonality when applicable. However, as more history is included, you also may want to be in a situation where you exclude a larger range of time. We've heard over and over that everyone wants to forget 2020 when it comes to financial results. IBM has also heard this, and they continue to develop updates, which will allow you to define what data should be included in your calculations and what data should not be included. When Nina had presented the demo, she showed you that there was a drop down that said you can ignore a time period. The current version ignores a time period. As part of the roadmap, IBM is planning to release a version in the first half of this year that allows you to specifically define a set of time periods. And the roadmap gives us the ability to individually define. So if you say 2020 had COVID, I want to ignore the whole thing. It's very easy to click on 12 different months, 12 different time periods and ignore it. But if you determine some of those months might have been good and some of those months are things that I do want to include in my historical to come up with the predictions, this roadmap, this feature is going to give you that ability. And you also want to think about your data level. In the first bullet, I had recommended calculate your predictive budget at some form of high level. But when you're doing this, when you're thinking of things at a consolidated level, it's important to ensure that you choose a level where everything below has a similar pattern. You know your data better than anyone else, so think about what kinds of groupings are similar. This could equate to product groupings, it could equate to account groupings, or maybe even some kind of subgrouping within that. For example, you probably don't want to trend net income as a whole, but instead may want to trend revenue independently from your expenses. And when you're looking at revenue, maybe you want to group those together, revenue by type, revenue by the expense, by various buckets, things like that. So as you're thinking about it, you want to put the two pieces together. Your goal is to understand how to use the tool, but your goal is to also understand when to use the tool. That's where things get complicated. There are a lot of pieces that come into play just in the predictive forecasting side, and Revelwood is here to help. If you have any questions, if you have any users that want to learn about planning analytics, if you have any questions regarding your overall development approach, the overall system performance, as we said at the very beginning, Revelwood has been doing this for a while. We definitely have recommendations both on the business side in regards to how to use it and on the technology side in regards to how to optimize it. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help in regards to training, optimization, pieces like that. In addition, Revelwood has a knowledge center and we create weekly tips and tricks. Those weekly tips and tricks, again, I'm going to use the phrase from before, they follow the full gamut of all aspects of using planning analytics. Sometimes they're technical tips and tricks. Nina recently did a 3-part series on the details associated with predictive and with the planning. Sometimes they're financial tips and tricks. Sometimes they're Excel tips and tricks. But please sign up. Every week we'll be able to provide something, and hopefully it's a quick and easy read that'll give you something new that you may not have realized about the tool. As I said earlier, Revelwood's goal is over the next few months to offer details of each of the new features of the experience. Today's focus was on predictive forecasting, and our next webinar that we're going to be conducting in approximately a month is going to be about system administration. We're going to talk about ways to configure, to maintain, to preview some of those aspects that we have. So please save the date and please register to join us to see a little bit more about the administrative side. But most importantly, please don't hesitate to contact me if there's anything that we can talk about, whether it's predictive modeling, whether it's planning in general, whether it's something about TM1 and planning analytics. I would love to meet with you for a 30-minute coffee with Lee session. And if we could, that's something that we can get together. We'll even send you the coffee. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call. And I thank you all for your time today, and have a great day.